Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by the North Idaho College and their upcoming Pave the Way to Global Accessibility Awareness Day, or PWGAD, which is going to be held in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. PWGAD is on April 19th, 2023, and more information can be found at nic.edu/PWGAAD. So we want to thank them for being our sponsor on today's podcast. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as Director of Training Solutions and Principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm Director of Media Productions here at Chax Training Consulting. And also, Chad and I are certified as Accessible Document Specialists by the IAAP. Matter of fact, Chad, interestingly enough, a friend of ours, Karl Groves, just posted a LinkedIn article about the certification and tests for IAAP. Did you happen to see that article?
I did not.
It is about, should the test be hard? And he actually goes on to talk about the idea that they require 3 to 5 years of experience that you have to submit, showing you have proof that you have 3 to 5 years of experience before taking the test. And so there's a lot of people that have mixed opinions about that. And why do I have to prove? And, Karl goes on to write a very great article about the idea that it should be hard and you should have to prove. And they're not the only ones that require, proof that you actually know your stuff beyond being able to take a test well. Because, the whole idea of these document specialist tests or the web accessibility specialist test is to prove, to validate that you actually have the actual job skills to do the job. The idea that it needs to be more than just the test, I think, is super important. Don't you think?
I do. I mean, in my career, there's been a lot of, I have a lot of certifications, and, I kind of go back to my, my days of teaching the Adobe products, and people used to always come up and ask me, like, how do you study for the test? And
Right.
They didn't really like my answer because I would tell them I didn't.
Right.
I didn't study for those tests because I use the product every day. Don't get me wrong. I would often look at they would often give you like a document and it had a couple of test questions on it or whatever. But, I think fundamentally, there's people, I think you just kind of, touted yourself as somebody who was pretty good at taking tests.
Right.
Like you have a kind of a knack for it, right? And I know there's methodology behind that and everything like that, but I think fundamentally, passing a test is good, but once you pass the test, you actually have to be able to back it up. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so fundamentally, you need to be able to do it. You need to be able to actually do it. So, not that I'm tearing down studying for a test. I'm not saying that at all. But I also think you have to remember that once you pass that test, you actually need to be able to do the work, right? And some of that comes with experience, right? And I think that's part of the reason why IAAP wants you to have that experience up front.
So it was just really great. It was a good article. There are some people out there like, well, why does IAAP get to be the ones who make that determination? And my answer to you is our experience creating the questions for that test was not like everybody just submitted an Excel file and we just sat around and go, oh, these sound like good questions and make it happen.
Right.
It was an arduous process, heavily vetted by some of the best minds in document accessibility. And, I couldn't imagine just kind of throwing it together. We spent weeks going over those questions.
Oh, right? Yeah. And there was some pretty heavy debate among us quote unquote experts, right? I mean,
Right.
I prefer not to call myself an expert because I'm always learning something new. I don't really like the term, but there's a group of us, collectively, and I will say, like, we butted heads.
Yeah.
Right. Like we each felt strongly about certain things. And there were times where we would argue a point, and we would kind of explain our side of the equation. And sometimes we'd win and sometimes we'd lose. Right. I mean,
well, but it's all backed by fact, right? I mean,
of course.
The whole point is that it all goes back to, here's some documentation that backs up why we believe a certain thing or not. Right. And so, that's the body of knowledge, helps you get there, helps you study. It's definitely not all you need to know to be proficient at the job. It's like how you and I talk about the tools, the accessibility tools, using Common Look or Access PDF or, Equidocs, any of the Foxit, any tool. You have to be able to understand what's going on behind the scenes, because when the tool doesn't work right, or the document doesn't behave well, and you have to go in and manually fix it, you have to know, first of all, you have to know it's wrong, because sometimes you'll pass a checker even though it's wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Other times it'll be wrong, but it won't give you a solution, or it will, and it'll be the wrong solution, and you create more errors. I mean, I don't know how many times that's happened. So, it's definitely, you have to go back and make sure you have a good, solid foundation, understanding the principles of accessibility. We say it almost every time we talk about the subject.
Yeah. And, I've had a lot of people, I mean, we do a lot of training stacks, and,
right.
And I've had people walk up to me afterwards and they're like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to remember all of this? And I say, listen, you don't have to remember it all now. Right. But as you do the work, as you see more and more documents, and you see different scenarios, you're going to build your knowledge. And you're going to start to, you and I can look at a document, and I can look at the tag structure without even really seeing the document.
Yep.
Right. Which is a really weird thing. But
the matrix.
It is. It's a little bit of an oddity, but I can look at the tag structure, and without even seeing the page, I can tell if it's wrong or not.
Yep.
That it just comes with doing it, with experience. So be that as it may, but just know, everybody, that, I know accessibility can be a little bit daunting, especially to the beginner, but just give it time, put the time in, work on as many documents as you can. And the more experience you get, the better you're going to get. Yeah.
Well, the other thing we want to talk about, Chad, was, this is something that came up in the Facebook group. And if you are a new listener, well, we probably have quite a few new listeners to the podcast, because we just came back from CSUN, the CSUN Assistive Technology Conference. And we met so many amazing people. I think we might even just do a show, Chad, later on, just about some of the contacts we made at CSUN and the different things that we learned. I think that would be a great podcast. What do you think?
Absolutely. Between, the new people we ran into, friends that we know, we made a lot of great peer connections, I would say. And we made a lot of good connections, certainly on the business side of the equation as well. We're there to help people. We're there to help people overcome the challenges of accessibility. And I think we made a lot of really good contacts, and we had a lot of interest from other people. We had a booth there this year.
Yes, it was great.
Which was really, really cool.
Yep.
And we had an awesome location. I mean, I was thrilled with our location. And it was just a great conference. From the sessions, the exhibit, the after, the end of the day festivities. I mean, it's just a really great conference. And Cam Baldwin was posting to everybody to talk to your boss now and get approval for next year. He's like, get it in early, right? Because it really is a great conference to go to.
Well, we'll definitely talk about that on another episode. So So anyway, to those of you who are new to the podcast, we have a Facebook group called PDF Accessibility. You can find us on Facebook. Just search PDF Accessibility and you will come right up. But somebody was asking about hyperlinks needing alt text. And do hyperlinks always need alt text? Is it mandatory that that every hyperlink has to have alt text? And it was interesting because one of the comments that was posted was, yes, every image, every link has to have alt text. And I paused and I asked, well, success criteria, the Web Content Accessibility Guideline 2.4.4 link purpose says that the purpose of each link can be determined from the link text alone or from the link text together with its programmatically determined link context, except where the purpose of the link would be ambiguous to users in general, which basically means if I can't tell what the URL is or where it's supposed to take me or what's going on, then yeah, there should be some alt text. But if it has that context, then no, I don't need the extra alt text. Right. And the other person on the board, their comment was, no, it's non-text content. The actual URL, the annotation, the underlying annotation is in fact an object. It's a non-text object. And I don't know. I disagree, Chad. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that you disagree. And I'll tell you why, because again, anybody who's worked on a document, right, knows that a hyperlink cannot exist on its own, right? You can't have a hyperlink just floating in no man's land because you're going to get an error, unmarked annotation, right? A link needs to be attached to something. And the way that it does that, of course, is that you have a link tag, and then whatever it's attached to, the content is positioned within that link tag. And it certainly could be text. It could also be a figure for that matter, right? I mean, it could be either or. So if you think of a link as non-text content, I mean, I don't know that I would disagree with that assumption fundamentally. However, the fact that that link can't live on its own kind of debunks that, that theory, if you will.
I think of it like a shoe, right? There's an insole. You have an insert in your shoe. You would never and can never just wear the insert. You have to have the shoe in order to wear the insert. It doesn't exist without the other. I mean, yes, it's an object. Yes, you can go buy an insert, but you can't just walk around with an insert on the bottom of your foot unless you like super glued it on there or taped it to your foot or did something weird, right? I mean,
that is the craziest analogy I've ever heard, but I get it. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. I would agree with you. So now, and again, right. I mean, so here's the thing too, right? I mean, you mentioned WCAG success criterion. Right. PDF UA says every hyperlink needs alt text. Now, again, I feel like that is a brute force effort, right? I feel like it's a very brute force approach to the problem, because I feel like over time, we all have gotten very good at ensuring that our hyperlinks contain meaningful content.
Right.
Right. Again, in the days of click here or download here or, go here. Okay, we could argue that alt text is valuable in those scenarios, but when your link contains meaningful text, adding alt text, in my opinion, is redundant.
Well, it's not even redundant, Chad. It replaces. It's not like it's going to say whatever you have on the page and then the alt text. It's literally going to one-to-one replace the text that's on the page. If it says 2024 earnings report, in the text, it says download the 2024 earnings report, and you put alt text on that says 26 meg PDF on the company website, on BMW's company website. It's going to just say that. It's not going to say download the earnings report. The visual person will get a different experience. They'll hear the alt text but see the text. But for a blind user, a person who doesn't have the benefit of both senses is going to only get the alt text. That's all they're going to hear, and that's problematic.
And that's a really good point, Dax, especially when our approach to accessibility is equal access for all.
Right.
And so you just kind of, you're right. You reminded me about that, right? That the fact that the alt text replaces the text. I'm not going to say actual text because I don't want to confuse things, but the alt text replaces the text that is applied to the link.
Right. It's the on-page visual description of the thing, it gets replaced. The other thing is that the pre-flight fix-up, right, Chad? The pre-flight fix-up, what we complain about it and say, well, it doesn't really do anything because when you run it, all it does is regurgitate whatever was the on-page link as the alt text. And like you said, then it's basically being redundant. What are we doing it for if we're just regurgitating what's there?
Well, we're doing it simply to satisfy the PDF UA requirement. That's really why we're doing it. I mean,
that's such a frustrating thing.
We're doing it to get the green check mark, and I mean, that's really hard because we all want to provide our client with a clean report.
Right.
Right. You can't hand a client a report that has a red X over it and say, oh, just ignore that.
Right.
It's good. Right. No client, the client's not going to understand. So it's what do I call it? A sticky wicket. Right.
It is a sticky wicket. Well, you talk about satisfying the requirements. Here's the flip side of that. Right. So I don't want to just poo-poo PDF UA. Here's one where I defend PDF UA. The document tag. That all PDFs should start with a document tag. And someone asked in the Facebook group the other day, how do I convince my boss that I'm supposed to spend the time to make this document tag? And I said, well, it's like trying to convince someone you should start a sentence with a capital letter because I mean, how do you explain that? You just should. It's proper grammar. It's the way it's supposed to be.
Well, and I'm going to get nerdy on you here because the tag structure is very reminiscent of a markup language.
Right.
Right. And every markup language, whether it be XML or HTML or SGML, has a root tag.
Right.
It has one tag that rules them all, so to speak, one tag that contains all other tags. And that's exactly what the document tag is serving as well. It's one main tag that contains all the other tags. Without that, everything is just chaos, right? Everything is there's no one parent element. They're all parent elements. Right, within the tags tree.
Well, I kind of think of it like if you drove in the drive-thru. I'm full of analogies today.
I know, man.
You go to McDonald's, you pull up to the window, and they hand you your shake, then they hand you the little baggie of fries, and then they hand you your sandwich, and then they hand you your cookie and your whatever, and all of it separately. Yes,
I like that.
You can grab them all separately. Can you still eat your lunch? Absolutely. Do you still know that you're going through a drive-thru? Yes. But it's not the way you do it. You put things in a bag and you hand them the whole entire bag, and
it's not efficient.
It's not efficient. Well, the argument is, well, if it works, if it doesn't affect how the PDF's read by a screen reader, then why does it matter? You're wasting extra time. Well, I guess I get that, but you never know. It may be a time where folios inside a PDF will actually work. Portfolios where you can put together multiple documents in one PDF and it be accessible. Currently, it's not. But let's just say at some time in the future, we're able to do that. Well, the way that the screen reader would be able to tell one document from another, the beginning of one document and the end of another, would be that document tag. right? And without it, it's harder to, it would be impossible, I guess, to tell the difference between when one document started and another one and ended.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And so it's, I get people questioning it, right? I mean,
Yep.
I absolutely get people questioning it, but as somebody who has done a lot of work with markup languages, it makes complete sense to me that, we have one container tag, the document tag,
Right.
that rules them all, or that contains all the other tags. So
Absolutely agree.
So, Dax, I wanted to bring something up, and we didn't talk about this before we, started today, but I remembered something that I wanted to bring up, and that is that the Microsoft Edge web browser has decided to replace their internal PDF renderer with Adobe Acrobat.
Oh, okay.
And I don't have much that I can say about it. I just wanted to mention it because it definitely piqued my interest, right? Because in a previous podcast, we talked about the challenge of it on a lot of people's computers. The default viewer for PDF files is the web browser.
Right.
And as we talked about, assistive technology is useless, right?
Yep.
Because it can't get to the tag structure of that PDF file within a browser.
Sure.
I'm really, really curious with Adobe being the PDF renderer, if that could change in this scenario.
Yeah. Well, on the topic of the Microsoft, genre, they just, have a new tool now, the Microsoft Accessibility Assistant.
Yeah.
If you're using Word and you go in and you color one of your headings a light green, this little warning is going to pop up and say, hey, you just use a color that might not be accessible to everyone, and not just tell you that you did it wrong, but say, hey, here's 3 other colors that you could use that would be a better fit, that are close to the color you're using. And I thought that's an amazing leap forward for Microsoft.
I think it's a simple thing, but I think it's genius, right?
Yep.
Because, and again, if you're a designer, right, you're going to put a lot of thought into the color you're creating, so on and so forth. But for the average user who's just creating documents and wants a colored heading, I think this is a brilliant innovation because it's going to notify them. And if somebody knows even a tiny little bit about accessibility, they're going to be like, oh, well, let me make sure that this does meet minimum color contrast to ensure that this is accessible for more users. And I think it's great. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Now, if they could just get rid of the automatically generate alt text for me, that would be awesome. Well, Chad, I guess today is a Microsoft day. Let's talk about so styles in Word, right? People use, we always preach using styles as the best way to make your document more accessible. One of the things people often struggle with is the title style, right?
Yeah.
And the idea that they use the title, but it just exports to a paragraph tag. And you and I were talking about, we always teach how important it is to use styles inside Microsoft Word, right? But how do you create a new style that also maps to a specific heading in Word, so that when you export it, maybe you want to make your own version of the H2, or you need another H3 in addition to the one that Word provides for you because of the way your document structure is and how you want to style some of the text. So how do we go about creating custom styles that actually map to known heading levels?
So yeah, I mean so what I always tell people, like the default heading styles in Word, right? Heading 1 through heading 6 automatically maps to the appropriate tag. right? So if you use heading 1, it'll map to an H1. Use heading 6, it'll map to an H6. But a lot of people like to create their own styles, right? And I certainly am one of them, right? I typically do main heading, subhead, subhead. Like I love my custom style names. But when you do that, the default property is that all of them are going to map to a P tag. So Word does give you the ability to control what tag is going to get applied to that style when it's output to PDF.
Sure.
And the way that you do that, at the bottom of the styles, so in Word, in your ribbon, you have what I think it's called the Quick Styles menu, where you, in your ribbon you can kind of see all of your styles. But in the lower right corner of that section is a tiny little icon that's like a right down arrow, like a right angled down arrow. And if you click on that, then you could see the styles panel as a regular panel in Word. And I love this panel. It's so much easier, in my opinion, to work with than the quick styles. And so if you create a custom style and you want to map it to a particular tag, what you could do is if you go to the right of the name of the style, you're going to see a little down arrow. And if you click on it and you choose modify, that will open up the modify style dialog box.
Right.
And within that dialog box, if you click on the format button in the lower left corner and then choose paragraph, it will open up your paragraph properties. And within that dialog is a field called outline level. And the default value is going to say body text, which basically equals a P tag.
It'd be so nice if they just label this heading level, right?
I know.
Outline level.
Yep.
It's a heading level, but I get it.
Absolutely. It really means heading level. And so within that drop-down menu, you have body text, and then you have level 1 through level 9, although really only level 1 through level 6 applies to what we're talking about. But if you choose level 1, now that style is going to map to an H1 when you generate your PDF file. So that is the kind of the magic behind styles and how to get them to output to the correct tag in the PDF file.
Right. And to take this a step further, we know in the default styles, we have 1 through 6, but we also heading level 1 through 6, but we also have the title style, right? And that title, unfortunately, you would think would map to heading level 1 or something else. It just maps to a P tag. It's just mapped to body text. So you can actually use that same principle, go over to your title style, or you can actually just right click on the title style in the ribbon and go to modify, right? And then click on format and then paragraph. And then right now you can see it says body text, and you just change that to level 1. And then you'll be able to then, the title will come out as a heading level 1, because you can have multiple styles that map to the same heading level, but you just want to make sure you use them responsibly and keep things in order, right?
Right. And we talked about this in previous podcasts, right? I mean, we actually talked about the title tag, right?
Right.
You know, and we're
well,
not.
We don't want to go. Yeah, let's not go down to that rabbit hole today.
Yeah, we're not going to dive down that today. But typically, you know, I mean, in a lot of documents, you will have like a title style,
right?
And you know, oftentimes you want that style to map to an H1, and then it's okay if your main heading style also maps to an H1. Not a problem. It's not a violation of any standard. So
all right, Chad, we're going down that road. You said we're not going down that road, and here we are going down that road.
Okay.
All right. So go ahead, Chad.
Well, and then while we're talking about styles, right? So let's talk about styles in Adobe InDesign.
Sure.
Right? Now, Adobe InDesign, unlike Word, InDesign does not give you any default styles with the exception of a style called basic paragraph, right? And basic paragraph is just like generic text, right? And so when we create styles in InDesign, we really have complete control. We have full control. Name it whatever you want. And sometimes that could get us into trouble, right?
Yes.
Because by being able to name it whatever you want, sometimes people get a little too creative with their naming conventions.
Definitely.
And they'll want to use special characters in their style name. And a special character is basically anything other than a letter or a number, right?
Well, you can use dashes and underscores, right? But you cannot use a plus symbol. I think a colon, maybe a colon's okay, but a paragraph symbol,
an at symbol is not good.
At symbols are not good.
Pound sign. Pound sign is not good.
Apostrophe is another one that isn't good, right?
Yeah.
And so really, guys, when you make your styles, just underscore or dash if you need to, but beyond that, just really try to keep it simple, because the more complex you make it, the more chances you have to make them be wrong. And I will tell you, Adobe, if you go to Adobe's, stock.adobe.com and you go download an InDesign template, a lot of them are machine generated. So your styles that you get will have some of these crazy long style names that are super long, or have special characters in them because they've just programmatically, somehow assigned it. And go ahead.
Yeah. And so the problem, right, if you're like, well, what's the big deal? Like, why can't I use unique characters? Well, when you make a PDF out of Word or InDesign, I don't think PowerPoint does the role map, but InDesign and Word creates a role map. And what a role map is that the PDF remembers the name of your style, but then it maps it to a standard tag, right? So typically in my document, I have main heading, and that maps to an H1. And if I go into the role map of my PDF, there's going to be an entry that literally says main heading, and then there's like a space, and then it says like /H1, right? And that means that what was the main heading style is now mapping to an H1 tag. Well, if your style contains a unique character, it breaks the role map.
Right.
The role map does not understand that character and effectively ignores it. Right. And one of the giveaways, like one of the ways you could tell there's a problem, is if you look in your tag screen, your PDF, and all your tags are P, H1, H3, and then you see a tag name called pound main heading.
Yes.
Or, something crazy like that, right?
Yeah.
That is a dead giveaway that your role map is broken, because you have a style that has a unique character. So
right.
It's and again, like, I know people are probably thinking, like, how the heck does he know this? Because it happened to me, right?
Yep.
That's how I know. And it was I remember when it happened, it was a really interesting discovery, because when I looked at it, I'm like, oh, wow. And right away I noticed like the pound sign or the @ I forget what it was, but right away I'm like, I feel like that could be a problem, right? And so I went back to InDesign, renamed my style, re-exported, and everything was fine.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
No, awesome. Well, this has been a great episode, Chad. We talked a lot about, this is the styles episode, right?
Yeah.
It is, and the analogies episode. So
right.
It is, I am never one for I've never a loss of words for an analogy. It is my life's, it is my superpower. One of my ADHD superpowers.
I love it.
So the next place they can catch us is going to be in Austin, Texas, May 7th through the 12th. And we're going to be there for the John Slayton Access U conference. And we're going to be doing another pre-conference lab. Chad, this last one was so well received. The one we did at CSUN. In fact, we had 3 blind people in our class doing document testing with NVDA, which got to tell you was a little intimidating for me because these are native screen reader users. And if you say the wrong thing, they're going to call you on it, right?
Absolutely. But it was so cool, right? I mean, it was so cool having them in there and getting their insight, right?
Yep.
I also did a session, Dax, not to segue here, but I did a session on fillable PDF forms.
Right.
And I had a blind user in that session, and he gave me some really good insight, right?
Awesome.
I mean, as I'm explaining to the audience, like, this is how assistive technology, reads the form. I had created like a creative little thing at the bottom with radio buttons. And the question was, where in the room would you like to sit? And they could choose front left, front middle, front right, And the gentleman in the front, who is a native AT user, had some really good insight and just how he feels about forms and the process of reading them. So I agree. In our NVD document testing with NVDA session, having those native users in there was really great. I think not just for us, but for everybody in the class.
Absolutely. So definitely come out and see us in Austin. It's going to be May 9th through the 12th, and it's actually going to be both virtual and in person at St. Edward's campus in Austin, Texas. So if you want to join, feel free, go ahead and head over to nobility.org. And you can find access to the 2023 John Slayton Access U there. And we would love to see you. We are, you and I are both going to be there, and it should be a good time.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you all for tuning in this week. I hope you enjoyed it and found our content interesting. Once again, we want to thank the North Idaho College and the upcoming Pave the Way to Global Accessibility Awareness Day for sponsoring our podcast this week. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.